And I think that consciousness really is the key to this, and I think that the reason why, like Jordan Peterson and even people like Sam Harris, they're trying to talk about consciousness, and they're sometimes they struggle to fit all those things together. There's an intuition that consciousness is the key because consciousness is a self-referential phenomena.
Jonathan Pageau proves in this video that consciousness is fundamental. He talks about how the universe appears to us in a fractal fashion, which I also believe, and I'll make another video expanding on that belief. But watch how he points to consciousness and the fact that it is base reality.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So Matthieu and I, we are starting our second conversation for our YouTube channel. And we thought that this time we could talk about the problem of self-reference, and also the idea of how symbolism works as a series of embedded patterns, one in each other, like a kind of fractal structure where the larger structure repeats itself in the smaller structure, and how those two questions, the question of self-referentiality and the question of patterns embedding themselves as replicating themselves in embedded structures, how they're related. And to be honest, we're a bit nervous to talk about this because the whole question of self-reference and the question of things that refer to themselves is the kind of subject which, just when you try to talk about it, and even when you try to think about it, turns your brain into a kind of mush where all of a sudden you can't see clearly because of the problem of something trying to look at itself. But it's a really important aspect of symbolism, and it's an important aspect of what's happening right now in the world, because this problem of self-reference is popping up more and more, even in science and in culture, and so it's important to talk about it.
That's a big reason why I hesitate sometimes and take long to make these videos. He explained it exactly right.
So maybe the first thing we can start with is the question of how we mentioned this in our last discussion a little bit. The problem of science as it stands right now is that it approaches the world as if the theory with which it's looking at the world is not part of the universe, but it has to be part of the universe because, I mean, the universe is everything. And so the theory has to somehow be part of the universe. But the question is, how can it be at the same time part of the universe while being the thing that's looking at the universe, trying to understand it? And I think that consciousness really is the key to this, and I think that the reason why, like Jordan Peterson and even people like Sam Harris, they're trying to talk about consciousness, and sometimes they struggle to fit all those things together. There's an intuition that consciousness is the key because consciousness is a self-referential phenomena. It is the capacity that we have to kind of, in one way, stand above ourselves and look at ourselves, but at the same time, this capacity to look at ourselves is part of ourselves as well. And so it's as if the origin of consciousness is a self-referential loop, which then moves out into the world and then becomes a coherent, let's say, structure of representation. But it starts in this necessarily self-referential loop, and that seems to be that self-referential loop at the beginning of reason, or at the beginning of logic, and the beginning of a structured world, seems to be the thing that science, or that kind of skeptic type people want to avoid. They want to avoid the inevitability of that problem of a self-referential loop at the beginning of things.
It is consciousness. Consciousness is the key. Science is pointing to that direction. Religion already does. However, I think that both of them, to some capacity, view it as some kind of, again, feature or emergent phenomenon. My claim is that it is the very base reality. It's base reality for me, for you. Consciousness is infinite, and then it appears to itself as an infinite amount of finite things. And then those finite things evolve or may not evolve, but if they do into a reasoning being like a human, you can create cultures, ideas, religions, attire, recipes. It expresses itself in an infinite amount of ways. And I think that ultimately, because of our limited nature, we assume that we are those identities instead of the identity that is base consciousness. Strip every single one of us of our idiosyncrasies, of our physical features, our culture, our personal history, then you see that there's no identity there except for the fact that you are a knowing, present being. But the being that you think you are, its nature is to identify with this limited physical corporeal state versus the identity being that which is aware and to a degree animates this body.
This consciousness, or I should say self-awareness or something like that, maybe not just consciousness, is when you begin to include yourself in your model of the universe. So we make models of the universe. That's what we do on a regular basis. I would say you become a little bit more self-aware when you become aware of the fact that there's a theory and there are facts, or there's language and there's facts, and when you get out of the system and you see this, that's one kind of awareness. But then I think there's another level of awareness where you realize that, or you identify with, not the language, not the theory, but the mediator between the theory and the fact. It's hard to explain, but it's
well, one of the things that seems to be bringing this up, and
before they continue, and I don't know if I misinterpreted this, but I think that the theory includes Christianity. It includes science. It includes every other religion. I'm specifying Christianity because that's their belief. But that's because they're all, to a degree, egotistic. And I mean that with no offense. I just see things a little bit differently. And if Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, I want to know that.
And this has been interesting for me to watch, and I see it especially with what Jordan Peterson has been talking about, is using biology and using Darwinism as a way to show the problem of this self-referential loop. Because when using biology and neuro psychology and Darwinism, you have to realize that our models of the universe, the way we look at the universe, has to be part of the process which made us human. It has to be a product of evolution, or a product of the manner in which we think, or the manner in which we look at the world. You can't. It's like when you used biology or Darwinism as a basis for the science, all of a sudden, even physics has to be a product of evolution. Even mathematics has to be a product of evolution. And so there is enough. It seems like there's enough self-referential capacity for self-reference to be able to give something which looks like the
traditional,
looks like the hierarchy of values that we find in the traditional worldview. And so that's been interesting for me to watch, because the way Jordan has been presenting this hierarchy of values isn't exactly the same ontological hierarchy that we find in a traditional representation, but there's enough correlation between the two to be able to say, okay, well, in the Bible, and when we talk about God in heaven, and when we talk about angels, and when we talk about earth, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a similar type of structure, which is the type of a dominance hierarchy, as he uses, as Jordan uses, that you have in Darwinism, and that dominance hierarchy, where, let's say, our theory of physics would be in that dominance hierarchy, and would be, let's say, one of the a major tool that human beings has developed to interact with the world. Like, that type of self-referential capacity is what gives the possibility of that hierarchy of values. Like I said, like we were saying, this stuff is really difficult to think about and difficult to talk about, but it seems like that.
What's funny is I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, when you think in traditional terms, as in a traditional cosmology, it's not a complicated subject at all.
Yeah.
It's the most obvious thing. But when you try to think of it with a lens of science, materialism, then it becomes a really complicated thing, because you're trying to, let's say, find some kind of agreement between the traditional cosmology and the materialistic one. So that's what's difficult. It's trying to reconcile those two perspectives, really, because when you begin to think in a traditional way, it's not a complicated thing at all. The idea of self-reference and the notion that the universe is a fractal is one of the first things that you encounter.
Yeah.
Because it's a natural thing. I mean, symbols are usually fractals.
Okay, so maybe instead of...
So this idea of the universe being a fractal, I agree with that completely. I think that the human being and animals and fruit, everything, they're all coherent, but they're microcosms of the macrocosm. It's a universe. It's one being, right? And so if we think of it mereologically, the universe is one thing, and we from our limited state observe it as a multiplicity. This body is one body. But if I start looking into its specific characteristics, for example, the hand is made up of fingers. Those fingers are made up of phalanges, skin, nails. Those nails and skin and bones are made up of smaller particles. And so you can always divide the world into a million parts and observe it in that way. But ultimately, in your ordinary experience, it's one unified experience. And so the universe is, I guess, at scale, the largest fractal. So anyway, I think that you see my point. This was a great video, great conversation between the two of them. I'll leave a link so that you guys can watch it for yourself. But I think this pretty much captures what it is that I'm trying to say. And it's curious how they go through it, but through a Christian lens. So anyway, if you can, I appreciate the time. Like and share it. And I will see you in the next one.